right, we're going to call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock. I don't remember going through an actual roll call in the past.
We could just acknowledge all members are present.
Okay, good enough. All members are present. Now, we should do introduction of new members, however. Welcome to Bill and Mark. I'm happy to have you. Maybe we should, if you want to spend just a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll kind of go around and everybody can introduce themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, I guess I'm an unusual combination of science, religion, and politics. Most of the things you don't want to talk about at the dinner table. I've managed to
No
integrate.
sex, just those.
Exactly.
Well, so that's a 3. You're supposed to never talk about sex,
Oh.
religion, politics. Okay.
Well, nowadays I don't know about that.
Yeah.
But I've managed to integrate science and religion and politics over the years. I'm formally trained as a scientist and a theologian, and politics is just what I do. Since college, I've been an activist doing this and that and the other thing. And I'm retired now, so I have time to do this kind of thing, which I hope I enjoy. It seems like it will. So
Okay.
that's about it. I don't know, any questions?
Welcome.
Where are you from?
I'm from Fox River Grove, been there for 35 years or so. My wife grew up in Fox River Grove, went through all the schools. And we live just outside of the city limits, though. Otherwise, I would have run for board member or something there anyway, because they just continually frustrate me in that town.
Okay. Welcome.
Bill Kernick. I'm a retired attorney. Retired about 1.5 years ago from my law firm in Rosemont. Firm is Knight, Hoppy, Kernick and Knight. I was a civil defense attorney. I was retained by insurance carriers, generally from municipalities and counties, to defend and represent their employees, officers, agents, if they get sued for civil rights violations, whether it was discrimination cases, was a police officer, excessive force cases, people dying in a jail. I would get retained to represent them. I've tried several cases. I started practicing law in 1975 after working as an engineer for U.S. Steel for 4 years. I worked in their design offices in Chicago, and they said, "Do you want to go to Pittsburgh?" back in 1968. I said, "Pittsburgh ain't for me." That's when it was really a smokestack city. So that's a little bit about me. I've defended the county in a couple of cases where they've had a conflict. I've worked with Scott in a few cases in the past, probably in the last 5 or 6 years is my recollection.
So why?
That's about me.
Why do you want to do this?
Why do I want to do this?
Yeah.
I've always been involved in the community. We moved to Lake in the Hills, my wife and I, from Arlington Heights back in 2018. In Arlington Heights, I was a member of our zoning board of appeals. For about 20 years. I was chair for most of that time, and it was just getting involved in the community.
Very good.
Give me something to do.
Exactly.
Get away from my wife.
Actually, it's more like your wife wanting you to go away, right?
These are all-
Remember this morning.
He's not allowed in the door till 4:30.
At least there's minutes feed.
Well, in the afternoon, she's out playing mahjong or playing cards or doing whatever. I took up golf just a few years ago. I'm not any good at it. I don't know that anybody would call it golf when they see what I do, but I'm having fun.
But you're out there.
Where did you say you're from?
Lake in the Hills.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's keep it going around the table for a minute. So, Alicia.
My name is Alicia Schuler. I'm the Communications and Project Manager here at McHenry County. I work for Scott. This is one of my other duties as assigned. I am the backup for the staff backup for the Ethics Commission. And a little bit about me, I've been here with the county for 5, almost 6-ish years. It's been a while. Started here as an intern, getting my master's in public administration, and moved up through the ranks since then. And I'm excited to be here. On a personal note, I am from Mount Prospect. I did live in Arlington Heights for a little while there too.
Right next door.
Just across the border. So yeah, great place. And I recently moved to Huntley.
Hi, I'm Kathy Bow. I'm Administrative Manager in County Administration. I am here just to keep order, do minutes, and help you guys out with anything you need. I live in Boone County, but I used to live in McHenry County. And I've been with the county for coming up on 5 years.
I'm Vanessa Cando. I'm from Crystal Lake. I am a retired corporate person working in various jobs. My last one was in the IT organization at Nokia. I did quality and engineering functions as well at Motorola and Nokia. Right now, I volunteer across the county with a lot of the different nonprofits. And recently took a part-time role over at the Family Health Partnership Clinic, which is a 501c3 located in Crystal Lake, serving all of McHenry County, the uninsured, people who can't afford health care. So.
With Suzanne Hoban.
Exactly,
Okay.
my boss.
Okay. I know I went through LGMC
Did
with
you?
Roush. Kathy?
Yeah,
Is she still there?
she isn't. She retired.
Okay. Oh, good for you.
Yep.
I'm Dawn Prushniak, currently live in Woodstock, retired, background in engineering. Most of my career was in sales, different kinds of things. Also a background in ministry. I'm a musician, so I'm pretty involved in my church. I love charting. I love making charts because it's taking a lot of nonsense and making it into sense. I did live in Pittsburgh. I was post smokestack days. It was really beautiful, actually. But I can see where in the smokestack days it would have been.
At the confluence of the Monongahela and the Allegheny.
In the Ohio. Yeah.
One of them caught on fire at one time, didn't it?
You know, the Cuyahoga River.
Oh, that was-
That was
Yeah.
actually in
Okay, fine.
Cleveland. That's where
Yeah.
I'm from.
Yeah.
So
Oh.
let's not go there.
Right, yeah, that's the Cuyahoga River.
Anyway, I have a special interest in helping people, talking about getting your affairs in order. As a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Actually have a book still on Amazon that's available, and that's pretty much it. So I've been here since September, something like that, about a year, coming up on a year, I guess. I noticed that my term is up next February, so I don't remember when I started, but something like that.
So it's a 3-year term, right? So,
Is it? I don't,
yeah. Kathy will verify.
yeah,
So
No,
what,
right
you
now.
said you're a musician. What do you play?
keys.
All right,
Yeah.
saxophone.
Oh, wow, okay.
I am Shelley Casella Durcole. I am a CPA. I have a firm in McHenry and Barrington called Eater Casella and Company. I'm the managing partner of the firm. I also am on the board of the McHenry County Community Foundation. I am the treasurer of the Village of Ringwood. I am a mom of 2. I'm getting married in July in Hawaii, where I'm getting 2 more children. Yeah, I've been on the commission. Now that I'm thinking about it, was probably early 21, because I think mine is up in 24 as well.
I think so too.
Did you fill someone's?
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Dawn and Shelley were both appointed during the February 16th, 2021.
No way. So it's 2 years. Wow.
We were at the same time though.
I thought we
I didn't
were.
think
I thought we
so.
started at the same time.
It was
I think
Celentano, Torsher, Punchniak, and Durkle were all appointed that day.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't remember that one person. Torsh.
She was
Did you ever see that person?
appointed? She was on.
She was on the agenda to be appointed that day. Maybe she did not
She
get
withdrew.
appointed.
She actually
Yeah.
withdrew her application.
I'm just looking at the
Yeah.
agenda.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm like, I don't remember
Yeah.
that. Okay.
She was on prior to that, going up for reappointment, and then she ended up withdrawing her name from Kansas City. I think it was the night of the appointment. So.
Interesting. Okay.
And you're here.
I'm
And you're an
here.
accountant.
I am. I don't do, I mean, my firm does a lot of tax and they're all like going
Okay.
crazy, but I literally, we have about 60 people in our firm, and I'm the managing partner, so like, that's my full-time job, is
Yeah,
our firm,
managing,
not
yeah.
actually clients, so I have freedom.
Good for you.
Which is nice.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm Terry Greeno, and I'm the liaison with the county board. And I was recently elected for District 5. I'm a business owner of a staffing company in Crystal Lake and West Dundee, and mother of 3, grandmother of 7, and live on the Fox River on a farm.
Well, I'm Scott Hartman, Deputy County Administrator, and I'm the staff liaison to the Ethics Commission. I've been with the county for over 8.5 years. Prior to being with the county, I was working for municipalities. I was in the municipal world. I worked for City of Marengo for a number of years, and worked in Kane County, worked in Lake County for municipalities. And while during my municipal days, I was actually a member of the Ethics Commission and served all through up until I took this job, which I had to resign my Ethics Commission chair to become your liaison, which I was happy to do so. I served as chair for a couple of years. I'm not sure how many years, but so I've been with the Ethics Commission for a long, long time, and so it was near and dear to my heart. And when you asked a question about liaison, this is, I think my passion, extra strategic planning, is the ethics ordinance, and because I've been with it so long. I live in Crystal Lake. I've been in McHenry County for, I want to say, since 2005, thereabouts. When Bill was giving his remarks, and I was so uncourteously doing one of that, because I'm from Pittsburgh.
You are?
And
Wow.
I was.
What's happening here?
I was a little boy during the smokestack days. Well, I mean, they were kind of, but it was right before the Renaissance Pittsburgh, which is the big cleanup effort when they would power wash the soot off the buildings. And I seen that as a little kid, and we used to boat the rivers, and the steel mills up on the hills were just shuttered, so I got to see true Rust Belt. And it's come a long way since then. But yeah, it's like, so go Steelers, go Penguins. And I also lived in Cleveland for 5 months.
Go Browns, sorry, I still have my sweatshirt.
Not when the Coyotes were calling fire, but I did for 5 months. I lived there, and so it's a small world.
So what part of Pittsburgh are you from?
Well, actually, I originally lived in the South Hills.
Okay.
So there's
Like Lebanon, or?
Actually close to Lebanon, Castle Shannon.
Okay.
So Castle Shannon, Bethel Park, kind of that area. That's where my family's from. Originally, they were from the Mount Oliver, which is, if you know Pittsburgh, there's a lot of mountains in Pittsburgh, or big, big hills. And but then we moved from there and went north to the Butler area. So it's about an hour north of Pittsburgh. And so that's where my roots are, and that's where my childhood was from. But I've been in Illinois since '93. My intent was to come here, went to graduate school, get my education, and go back home. But there's a Native American proverb that I came across, and that says, "If you step 1 foot in the Kishwaukee River, you never leave." And I'm an avid fisherman, and I fish smallmouth bass in the Kishwaukee River, and here we are, decades later, I'm still here, so they must be right. But I'm happy to be here and happy to be of service to the commission.
Very good. I have a technical question next. So up next we have the minutes approval, and there's only 2 of us here that were even in attendance at that meeting. So, can other people approve even though they were not, or can
Yes.
they vote to approve? Okay.
Yeah, appropriately, those in attendance would make the motion and second, but the other members, including new members, could vote. If the new members are uncomfortable voting, since you weren't part of it, you can always abstain as long as we get a third, that would approve the minutes. So you can approve the minutes.
Okay,
So-
that was my question. Okay, so everybody should have a copy of the minutes from the last meeting. Any comments? If not, I need a motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public comment, there's nobody signed up?
There was none.
Okay, fantastic. On to new business, operating policies and procedures review. This is where Scott shines.
Yes. Well, for a little bit of background, at our last meeting, we were going through a mock case. And in a discussion of the mock case, we were basically walking through the steps and procedures, and it was identified that the operating procedures, which are your governing document. This is the document that the commission can determine how you want hearings to take place in your order of business. So it's your document. it was indicated that there was something that needed to be changed. And so we had one change, bear with me, I thought I had it up here, but I will get it here real quick.
On page 12.
Yeah, so it should be in the HARC. I want to pull it up on the screen. It's one little change. Where is it? All right, hold on, let me just pull it up off the agenda packet. That might be the easiest way to go. I'm sorry, I thought I had this prepared, but I did not. And it's a small technical change. So we included, and this is your document, so you can change this as you deem appropriate, and there's a simple action of the commission, put it on the agenda, you can change it. The ethics ordinance, on the other hand, is the governing document. That can only be changed by the county board. Now, you can always make recommendations to the county board to change it, but the county board ultimately has to go through their process. But these operating procedures are all yours, and so I'm going to pull up the agenda, and you can probably see on the screen before me. And let's go right to this change. So right now this is only in draft, and as the chair had mentioned on page 12, so the only change that's reflected is in the documents that are made part of the record during the sufficiency of complaint probable cause examination, and this is the first step when the commission would see a complaint, is to make what's called the respondent's response part of the record. What that is, and this is a change to the ethics ordinance that was made a few years ago. If somebody receives a complaint, or somebody has a complaint lodged against them, the process used to be the complaint was given to the commission, and all you had was just the four corners of that complaint to really make a determination as to whether or not this happened. There was really not a mechanism for the respondent or the person whom the complaint was against to say, well, wait a minute, here's some things that are wrong with that complaint, or here's my side of the story. So you only saw one side of it, and the big change was to say that's not entirely fair. And part of it was based on, just to make it fair. So now, if a complaint is lodged, and initially the chair of the commission says, well, you know what, it's not going to be sua sponte dismissed, which means there's criteria. The chair can dismiss it if the complaint is against somebody that the ethics commission has no jurisdiction over, or the ethics ordinance. Say, for example, a judge. When it lodges an ethics complaint against a judge, that's not under the purview of this commission. There's no reason why it would come before here, so the chair could just say, that's on its face is dismissed. But if it were to move forward, the respondent has the opportunity then to present their case, if they choose to. They don't have to. It's 21 days after that notice to say, here's my side, or here's additional information, or here's where it's incorrect. And if they choose to do that, when it comes to the sufficiency of review, that should be part of the record. As you can see in the operating procedures, it's not, and what this does is just clarifies that and says the respondent's response is part of that record. If they choose to submit one, you put that in as an exhibit. So this simply makes that change. What I would suggest to the commission, you can make that change today, or as you go through it, you may see other changes, and it's really up to you if you wanted to make it so it's cleaned up today, or if you want to park that and as other changes come forward, maybe make a whole series of changes all at once. So when you see the title of the document, it says approved on and revised on. You don't have 15 revision dates. But that's really up to you. What I would recommend that the commission do, and historically what they have done, is at one point we commit part of the we commit a meeting just to go through the operating procedures to make sure that they currently reflect how you want to conduct business, how you want to conduct the hearings, and then you can actually make a whole series of changes there. So it's up to you. You can make this one change today, and that's your prerogative, or if you want to park it. We know it needs to be cleaned up, and the right thing to do is ensure it gets reflected. Just because it's not listed as part of the record doesn't mean you couldn't, as a commission, make the respondent's response part of the record, even though it's not specifically stated. So
that would be my only concern. If something came up, we want to make sure that we can make that part of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we should also have any documents or exhibits that are attached to the response.
All right, so let's go back
It
there.
should be part of the record, because I would assume the respondent may opt to attach documents and exhibits.
And similarly, the complaint could have exhibits attached to it.
Well, that's follows right there. It says any exhibits or documents appended to the complaint.
Complaint, okay, so,
So you could almost add append to the complaint and/or the response, right?
Correct.
yeah,
Yes.
okay. That's a great catch, okay. Right. So I'll say complaint and response.
Mhm. My only other question, I mean, I've been through the reading of the operating procedures, so I'm good with whatever we all want to do, if we want to table it and go through them all, so, or if we want to do something today. My only other question, I did read them again before the meeting. The only other thing that came up for me was this Exhibit 1 issue. And I guess for me, the question is, do we need to have an Exhibit 1? We haven't had one since I've been on the commission. And so I almost wonder, do we just eliminate it?
We certainly can do so. That was something that was intended to be put in there. The reason is because if you go through, obviously it's pretty complex. It's almost a flow chart that would be, there's drafts of it out there, but they don't necessarily reflect as the ordinance changed. But I'll leave it up to you to, it's something we can endeavor to develop and bring to you maybe at the next Ethics Commission meeting so you can adopt it. But it's something that I would recommend should be in there. It's
Okay.
to your point, but it's not been in there in a number of years.
Right, I think my only point is, if we're going to adopt something today, I would maybe eliminate it for this adoption, and then we can always change it again and adopt it with an exhibit later when, and if we ever have one.
Yes. Yes.
That we think works. That would be my only other comment. Any thoughts from the rest of the commission as far as what you would like to do with this? From a today standpoint, to table it till next meeting standpoint?
Yeah, what I heard Scott say was, we're not barred from using the revised operating procedures that we just revised, even though we don't adopt them. So maybe it just makes sense to do it all together. We'll use this as our working operating procedures, but adopt changes all at once. That's what I would think would make sense. I think it probably doesn't matter if we do it either way.
I'm indifferent.
Okay. And you're the attorney.
And I'm the attorney, yeah.
So you don't see this as a big deal? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So then I think the consensus is to table it till the next meeting, and maybe let's work on an Exhibit 1 and.
Any other changes?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, as you go through, if you see something that you'd want to bring up and talk about at say the next Ethics Commission meeting, please send me an email. Send it directly to me, not to the entire commission, because we have open meetings that we have to be mindful of. And then you can compile all those proposed changes, and we can discuss those, or you can discuss those collectively. So if you see things that maybe it's not clear, or typos, or something that you want to do differently, and we'll keep a running tab of all those proposed changes, and the commission says they're good, we can include them, or you can talk about them and determine which should be made and what shouldn't. So, all right. I did make the additional change as suggested. I'm going to hit save, and we will revisit this. Okay.
Okay. Then we're moving on to your training.
Okay. Let me get my notes here. All right. So this training module is something that all new employees have to take. All officers, anybody subject to the ethics ordinance by ordinance has to take this training. The general vehicle for the training it's done through a software which we use for all kind of documents and training called Power DMS. And so it's computerized. It's not online, but it's under our system. As new employees come into the organization and they go through their onboarding procedure, one of the things that they do with their very first day, first or maybe in the second day, is they go through the ethics ordinance training. So all our new employees are captured and go through this training. So this was written back in 2020. It was written and designed to be reflective of the then recent changes to the ethics ordinance. And the intent was to distill down the ordinance to make it very clear, just so there's a good understanding of what the ethics ordinance is. It doesn't go so much into the operating policies and procedures, but it really focuses on the ordinance, and it really tries to hit the key parts of it. And it's really, I think it's important that the commission go through a review of this so you understand what is going out there, what's being trained. For our new members, even for our sitting members, it's a great, I think, way just to help refresh or understand the ethics ordinance, because you get to go through this training. And I don't know if you took a crack at taking the quiz and seeing how you did, but those are the questions too, and it's always something to be very dynamic, and I really look forward to your input on anything we could change to make it more clear or to make it more fun, because it's not the most thrilling training in the world. But it's intended to be comprehensive on understanding the nuts and bolts of the ethics ordinance. And some things are worded particularly odd, like you'll hear a county officer, employee of an officer, or an employee. And that's really cumbersome and that's convoluted. But the reason why that appears in the training, and if you read the ethics ordinance, it's in there because we have to make a distinction between a county employee, which would include myself, Alicia, Kathy, an officer such as our elected county clerk. All right, that's an officer of the county, not an employee. And any of the employees in the clerk's office aren't employees of the county per se. They don't work for the county board. They're employees of an officer of the county. They're employees of the county clerk. So that's why we do that, and just to make sure it covers everybody, right? If we just say county employees, well then, by virtue of that, are we exempting all the employees of the clerk's office because, well, that's an officer of the county and they're not county employees. So we have to get a little particular just by nature of our organization. So when you see things like that, there may be reasons for it, but maybe there is a better way. I'm certainly looking forward to to seeing how we can clarify this, how we can simplify this, what we can do to once again to make it more efficient in this training, and to make it a little bit more exciting or more clear. So I'll leave it up to Chair how you would like me to proceed. I mean, I can go through it. If we can just maybe open it up. If you've read it and you have comments, we can just address those. Kind of throw them on the table and do more of a free-form discussion. It's really up to the Chair and the Commission.
Have you guys read it and tried to do the quiz?
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a question. Because the first time I was exposed to this was when I was on the mental health board. And so you didn't cover appointees. Is it only appointees of boards? Because those people aren't officers or employees. They're a different category.
Yeah, so that's right. So if you look at the very beginning, the elected or appointed officers, and so
because to me, an appointed position, like I always thought, oh no, I have to take this stupid ethics thing. It was so cumbersome, and I felt like most of it didn't apply to my position as an appointed person because it just felt like a very cumbersome, complicated. Are they trying to trip me up here? Are they actually trying to educate me? It just felt like, that's sorry, but that's
no, that's I understand. The intent is to try to educate. It's a pretty hefty ordinance, and there's a lot of things in there. Trying to distill it down into something that's going to be usable and consumable is a bit challenging. But to do that while not hitting those key points. And the whole intent is, and for those in HR and HR, one of a big defense is failure to train. And if somebody gets a complaint lodged against them because they committed some prohibited political activity and they're before you, they say, I had no idea. You never trained me on, I received no training that this was the wrong thing to do. So we want to make sure that that training has been done using our Power DMS system, and that's actually internal. So Mental Health Board, I don't think they have access to ours. It's documented. They've gone through that training, and there's a checkbox to it. We can always pull that training record and say, yeah, Alicia has been trained on it on this date, and so she should be familiar with this. With the Mental Health Board, it's a little different because, they're under the county, but they could have their own ethics ordinance or their own ethics ordinance or policy, just like the conservation district. They could have their own. If they don't have one, they can use this one, and I'm not sure. So the county, I thought that Mental Health Board did use ours.
Yeah.
So the training would be kind of outside of us. So this only, and I say us, this only deals within just those direct offices of the county. And did you do it by paper? I mean, how you did it
on the computer? You
did it on Power DMS?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So they do have Power DMS. Okay. Well, that's
they did. I don't know
did.
what they do now, but.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember if they did or not. So I'm glad to know that they do, and I'm glad to know that they are getting that training, because that's important. So I guess it is cumbersome, and they would fall, and then yes, as appointed, because the Mental Health Board is a governing body appointed by the county board, so then they would fall under that appointed officer. And so Leo, as the executive director, is an appointed officer of the county. So I guess it would fall under here. And I was going to pull up the ordinance to really show, because the ordinance does provide coverage for appointed as well.
Yeah, I guess my point is, it's a different experience than being an employee, I think. I mean, I think it's a very different experience than being an employee or an elected official or an officer. And so when I had to take it every year, and I think I served 4 years, and I always wondered, wow, I have no idea really why I'm doing this, because this seems to have nothing to do with anything that we did. And I don't know how many people who take that feel this way, but it seemed like it was awfully complicated, for some pretty basic categories. It got into a lot of detail that I just thought, take it, do it, and then boom, it's over. And then you take it the next year and go, oh yeah, I didn't like doing this last year. It's time to do it again.
So every county employee has to do this?
So is the point that you think it should be more abbreviated?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that it gets very technical, and I always wondered, are they trying to trip us up in these technicalities, or do they really want us to learn something? And I felt that because I went through it again and did it, and some of them were slightly tricky.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
what happens if an employee fails?
Well, that's the thing. You really can't. You can't get past it without successfully completing it. So if you get all the questions wrong, you can't move on to the next module until you get it wrong.
So you just keep guessing a different answer until you get it right?
Hopefully
Is
you
that
will
essentially?
learn from the mistakes. Yes.
I'm just trying to understand the process.
And speaking from an HR perspective, unfortunately, people are litigious and they're predators.
Mhm.
And so this is something that you put up as a basic protection, not only so that people have had exposure to it, so that they don't get taken advantage of or tripped up. And then if something does happen, you have a proper defense in a situation. And unfortunately, that's the world of HR. It's an awful place to live.
Right.
Yeah.
So part of it is just checking a box, really.
Mm-hmm.
Because I kind of agree from the standpoint of when I think about all county employees. I mean, if you're sitting there reading it, kind of struggling with, and even I was I'm not so sure on one of these answers. I didn't even answer it, and I'm trying to figure out how to put this the right way. But I mean, certainly there are different education levels in various positions within the county, and I can see how certain people could really struggle trying to get through this on an annual basis.
Yeah. And it's for actually the training requirement is only once. So the Mental Health Board is having it which I think is great. The ordinance only allows for once, and our county employees only have to take it once at that first time.
Scott wants it monthly.
Well, but you don't, people would know.
They would remember.
Yeah, but I think that's a very important point, is to say this needs to have a general understanding for all the various employees that we're going to have, and so it is cumbersome. I'll tell you what I'll say in the defense of that, though, is the ethics ordinance itself, and this is the ordinance on the screen, is by its nature is cumbersome. It's really based, a lot of this is out of the state statute, and the challenge is if we water it down, are we missing some key points, which then the effectiveness of the training isn't there. Somebody can say, well, wait a minute, I didn't know that was wrong because it wasn't in my training. So now they should have read the ordinance, of course, in the ideal world, but we're trying to really kind of instill into them, or at least give some exposure or awareness of all those key concepts. At the end of the day, after somebody takes a training and they're so overloaded with information, are they going to retain it? We would hope so, and that's maybe part of making the training more effective. But it's at least they can't say they didn't know. They haven't gone through that training. As we look at a revision to the ethics ordinance, and that's something that could be recommended, is maybe somebody has to go through it annually, or it only takes probably about a half hour to really go through it, to read it, to understand it, and whether you know the answers to questions, or if you get it wrong, you have to go back. So it's not a big time commitment, but it's it's something that right now it's one and done. But I'm glad the health board is taking it, or mental health board is taking it multiple times. But to get away from all of this, if there's a better way to distill down the ethics ordinance into the training, I think that's why we're here. Maybe let's find it. If we can do it, let's do it.
I think that if one of our goals is to promote ethics in government, we should maintain all the training possible.
And sadly, there are law firms out here that's what they do. They have social media campaigns. They're just looking for people to file nuisance lawsuits. And I know that I love that there's the part in there that if you file basically a nuisance lawsuit, that there's all sorts of consequences. There shouldn't be that everywhere, but so.
Yeah. I agree with you. I just wonder if we're talking about like effective training. Yeah, I don't know, just the way you described that it's done is more like a check the box method rather than truly trying to educate someone method. And I think that's where like maybe just my mental disconnect is, because it's like if we truly want to educate them on what the ethics ordinance means and what it means to have ethics in government, you probably can't do it via a computer screen where you can't fail. Right. You can just keep it just seems like there's and doing it once on the day you start, after you've filled out a stack of HR paperwork this thick, and you've introduced yourself to a bunch of people, and how much are they really retaining of this? And I understand it needs to be done, but then it's like, what else do you do to continue on to make sure that they truly are getting the education they need?
May I, as a county employee?
Yeah.
So I took that, obviously, almost 5 years ago, and I agree with you, you're taking so many things day one, but the ethics ordinance is available to all county employees on our SharePoint, and there has been many a times that something has come up within my position where I've referred back to that.
Okay.
Because I use that training as a baseline, and now I know it's there, and so I've referred back to that, and I've even brought questions to Scott saying, this was approached to me this way, and this is what I read in the ordinance. So I think that all the employees do know that it is available to them afterwards. And so of course we take it day one, and who remembers any of those questions, but we know it's there, and we know it's that we're held to that standard.
Which is at least the important part.
Yeah.
Right.
Not that I have it memorized.
No. Yeah.
And I think just another flavor from like a corporate environment, we had to take this sort of thing every year, right? And it was an online thing, and you went through and you took the quiz and whatever. And if nothing else, it brought these concepts top of mind once a year. Like, oh yeah, there is a gift band. Okay, I got to remember when that supplier offers me XYZ, you know, what's appropriate and what's not. And, you know, so it's more of a top of mind thing. But I agree with you, there are nuances in it. That's what makes it where you feel like you might be tripped up. It's not being tripped up, it's just there's so many different, there's exceptions and this is okay, but this really isn't. It's almost like there's a little bit of a gray area where in some of the points that's where I think you could have the perception that we're trying to trick you, but we're really not. It's just it's the concepts can be complicated and the situations can be complicated, and you never know what you're going to be presented with. And this is trying to give you a framework for dealing with those things, but it's hard, I think, to cover it all. And thank God it's only like 18 pages, right? It could be like 78 pages.
That's true.
So, I mean, I think it's just, it's hard to cover. But I do like the idea of doing it once a year to keep it in people's, you know, you're smart enough to know it's out there. Does everybody think, oh, geez, I remember that's out there. I could go and read it again if I have a question. I don't know if everybody thinks like that.
There's similar training for sexual harassment and anti-bullying, which we have to take, our employees have to take every year. It's an annual training. So that's not uncommon. And by statute, I think the sexual harassment training is every year. This, as you saw, includes sexual harassment as well. That's because the statute that basically overlies this, or I should say underlies this, included and required sexual harassment to be in here. And so that's what you see in the ethics ordinance. It's very similar. A sexual harassment policy for the county is very close to, it's not identical to this, but concepts are all still the same. So not to say that we, if the county board makes an amendment to the ethics ordinance, and there are several changes that were pending, and we have a new county board, and at some point in time they may come before you. That's something, and that was, I think, one of the recommendations, I think, that from previously was to do it annually. And if we can, we do it on the computer just for efficiency, and then we have that tracking that, Kathy took the training on this date, at this time, and but if you do it frequently, then it may permeate a little bit more into people if they do it every year. So there's a lot of nuance, and actually you're 100%. As you read through, there's gray area, which is where you come in, because that's where you're going to get your complaint. It's going to be in that gray area, and as a commission, you're going to have to sort through the facts and determine, whether or not that is within a gray area, or make an interpretation. Within a law, there's room for interpretation. So that's kind of part of your key roles when you adjudicate those claims, is to look at it. The training cannot cover every circumstance, and for those who've been through the mock cases, the intent is to try to find those areas of ambiguity in there and throw it to you and say, what do you think? And because you're always going to have it. Every case is going to be different. I like the word framework. It's a perfect. I think the intent of this is to give you that framework. What we always stress is if there's any questions, and like as Kathy looks at the ordinance, our ethics commission, our ethics advisor is our director of HR, and I tell her she has had questions come to her, so she's been able to field them. So the employees know, but. The long and short of it is more frequent training, I think, would really be beneficial. Right now, the requirement isn't for it, but I'd love to see that move forward to the ethics ordinance.
I wonder, excuse me, if the questions, the ordinance is the ordinance, so like it is what it is. And this is covering 4 basic topics. And so it seems to me that instead of the questions being kind of nitpicky, like, in section 12, part D or whatever, if we're really hitting for retention and awareness, if the questions maybe hit on more general areas and hit them and there's a little repetitiveness, so like, okay, this is about prohibited political activity, it's about gifts, it's about sexual harassment. Like, if people just remember that, and a little bit more detail, I think that's a win. But I think that when I took these questions, I'm like, oh man, I gotta go through, add it up from section 12 minus section 2. Section 2 was what? To me, I don't know that that's effective. I'm getting tripped up on some intricacies that I may never need again. So yeah, I know there's intricacies, but is it really serving the person who's taking the test the best to go, okay, I have all the detail in this document, I know what it's called, I know where to go. So maybe it's the test questions could be slightly less like we're trying to see if you read this thing.
Should we go through the, I mean, I think we've all read the ordinance itself, so I don't know unless anybody wants him to go through the actual ordinance, but maybe we go through the questions and see if anybody has comments.
Yeah, that's-
Keep in mind, apart from the questions, the examples that they use as well. I mean, that's part of the teaching.
Yeah.
And the examples for political activity, the examples for gifts, frequent things of officials going to an event down in the city and somebody's going to pay for their lodging. So I mean, at least you look at all the examples, cause you to be attuned to the issues, and at least somebody to say, an employee to come up and say, can he or she make me do that? Do I really have to do that?
Yeah, and so the questions are more or less situational, and really, so, but you know, how if we want to do a mix of more just looking at the ordinance, asking questions that they can refer back to, and you know, just to make sure that they recall that key point of it. This is however the commission wants to go, we can revise this. They were tended to be situational. I think Mr. Kernick put it just right, is to really kind of think through a situation and did they remember it, and how would that apply. But I think the point's well made is, okay, well, if it's, if you get it wrong, okay, well then you select the next answer. If you get it wrong, are you really thinking through, or are you just going through the motions just to get on, past the quiz? So,
Right.
yeah.
Well, either way, you're learning something.
Yeah,
It's no different when you hand out an employee manual and you tell the employee, sign it to acknowledge that you've read it.
Right.
How many have read it?
But they all sign it.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't want to water down, the expectations. I mean, that's why we're here, is to maintain ethics in government. And to put people in these situations is not to trip them up, as Dawn suggested, it's to educate. So that people realize that there is some areas that they might fall into that they might have to come before this board. And to answer again and again helps them figure it out, so they don't have to end up before this board or this commission.
Either that, or they don't actually read it and they just go through and answer A,
Well,
and then they
okay,
answer B.
Some people are going to do that. We can't perfect everybody.
It's like the system on that one.
It's hard to do that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's training. I did it.
Okay.
So.
But why should we cater to those people that would go
Right.
through and...
Well, the irony is we're in Illinois, and we're in a time where we've got a major case going on right now with the ComEd and the,
Yep.
you know what I mean? Like, we live in that world, and this is peanuts.
Yeah.
And hopefully we never even have a hearing, but
Right.
if people are, forewarned, then they have no excuse when they come.
I do have one nitpicky thing on page 1 before we move on. So it's like maybe the 6th line down, the first word in the line is training. First word in the line. If you just look down at the training at least once.
In the past instead of the past? Or you're in,
It's just like a little nitpicky, but. Yeah.
Okay, so training at least once, period.
For those who have taken the ethics ordinance training,
Oh.
There's two
In
types
the-
of those.
Good, that was a test.
I read it. I really did read it.
Why I'm not an accountant.
All right.
Okay, so why don't we endeavor to go through some of the examples and the questions, and we can make any comments?
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any examples in the first 3 pages that I saw. It's more just definitions and such.
Mhm.
So the first thing is section 1 quiz summary, those 2 questions. Can somebody tell me what the answers are?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Answers, okay. So I got those right. So,
Good.
so far, so good.
Good. That's what we should.
So what were the answers? C and B?
C and B.
Okay.
C and B if you don't know, yeah.
Yeah. Well, answer C is neither A nor B.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm saying number 2 is B, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
C.
I think for me, the level of detail in the choices maybe felt like it could be simplified a little bit. So, for instance, I like a lot of these examples because you can put yourself in the situation and go, okay, what would it be? So you can, for instance, on A, you can make that call while on county time, as long as you use your personal cell phone, not a county phone line, while sitting at a desk, as long as the chair is gray and there's only 2 drawers on the left. Like the level of detail was like what was a little it felt like it was a little more than was necessary to make the point.
So maybe just get rid of not on a county phone line?
Yeah, I'm like,
Well, it already says you're at your desk during work time.
mm-hmm.
To me, it's like, A, you can make the call. Well, I guess then, yeah.
Well, I think it emphasizes, I think what the
Right.
emphasis here is that a lot of people do things on county time that are not related to county
Mm-hmm.
issues, and they think it's okay.
Right.
Because they're on their
Right
cell
now-
phone or they're.
Right, or right now, we're watching basketball,
Mhm.
and everybody's doing their brackets. And so here they want, here the emphasis is you're working, this is on your regular hours,
Mm-hmm.
and they try and say, well, does it make a difference if you use your personal phone? And no, it doesn't, because you're sitting at your desk and you should be doing something other than talking on your cell phone or looking at your text messages. So I think that's what the emphasis there is. They try and trick you, saying, okay, you're using your cell phone, so you're really taken away from the county. And people probably think, well, I use my personal computer, I use my own cell phone to do my brackets. Is that a problem?
Mhm.
So that's what I thought was significant, at least, about putting juxtaposing those 2, personal phone versus county phone.
And the key in A is to say while on county time.
Right.
So you're being compensated.
Right.
And then B takes a little different. It says you could, use a county phone as long as you're not on county time, but it's a county resource.
Mhm. Yeah, I don't know that I personally had any issue with either of these questions per se. You good?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm
Now,
just,
one thing to keep in mind is they talk about vacation time off.
Mhm.
Vacation time off, at least from looking at this ordinance, appeared to be considered county time, that you're on county time. Because there was some discussion about regular, a regular sick day, whatever. So suggesting that being on vacation is really county time.
So that, and this is the ordinance, so compensated time, and that actually was a change in the let's say the 2019 or 2020 revision, to really boil out vacation time, any, we'll call personal time off. So it says it does not include designated holidays, vacation periods, personal time, break time, compensatory time off, FMLA, military leave, or any other period in which the employee is on a leave of absence. Because somebody could be working on a political campaign and they say, I'm going to take a personal day. I'm entitled to take this personal day to focus in on helping with this campaign. It's PTO. They're still getting paid for that day, but we did have to put in an exemption to specify, because at that point in time, you would deny anybody the ability to work on a campaign if they chose, which is their right. They can exercise their right to be politically active. Then they would be barred from doing it while on any personal time they'd available. So this does distinguish it and says if they're on vacation, they're able to. It's their time, even though it's a benefit that they're getting, but they're not technically on that compensated time for the county. They're not working for the county at that point in time.
Right. Okay. If there's no other questions on that, we can move on to examples. So on the next page, in training section 2, I think the first example is under exception 1 that I see. For example, suppose ABC Widget Company.
I thought it was a good example.
Yeah, I think that one's a good example. Mhm.
Which one are we looking at?
Under exception 1, there's 4 examples. Suppose ABC Widget Company.
Under training section 2.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And then under exception 2, there is another example.
I actually thought
That
this
example
was really good.
confusing.
Yeah.
to
Oh,
me.
I thought it was really good.
No, I mean, it's good, but it's like, it was like,
Legitimate market price.
right, like determining what is the actual market price, and I was like, wow, okay.
Mhm. Yeah, it gets deep pretty quick.
Yeah, that's, I know there was some discussion further on about, the determining the market value. And that one's squishy, right? It is, the face value of the ticket would, in essence, really would be the governing price. Because it's what they're trying to, what we're trying to illustrate. Now, if it's a $30 ticket, you got it for $25, and then you got it, was it an appropriate discount?
Yeah, but it like says that, and then I was like, okay, I get that, and then you go to the next page, and then it goes on to say that, okay, yeah, but if Ticketmaster is selling them for more than the quoted ticket price, then that really is the
Creating a market value.
market value. So it started to get,
Squishy.
very,
Yeah.
very confusing after that, yeah.
When I
So-
sell my Bears tickets online, they recommend a price. They say these
Sure.
are what the tickets are going for.
Right.
And when now I have to file a 1090, I get a 1099 from the Bears, the IRS says, for selling tickets and I guess whatever I'm making beyond fair value, but I digress.
Makes sense.
IRS is finding ways. Yep.
Need a good accountant.
That's right.
Well, and I appreciate this conversation, 'cause I'll tell you, as I go through, I started with this. This is something that was developed and was in the previous version of the training. Does it cloud the issue? I mean, as the Ethics Commission, if
I think so.
it's $30 market value, is that what you're gonna look at? If somebody alleges a complaint, are you gonna look at just the face value, or if they're going for $100, and I get it for $30, or is that a discount then? So if you're gonna look at it just at that face value, then maybe this is unnecessary in there.
Yeah, see, to me, what really clouded the issue is when you bring in the scalpers and all that. I think the person's probably now thinking they're thinking about that as being the wrong act, but we're really trying to talk about something else, the value of the ticket.
Mhm.
So, is there a better way to make the exception, like to just make it simpler that it's what the market value is? Maybe don't bring in those other details, because
Mhm.
doesn't it cloud the issue? I mean, it kind of did for me.
It definitely did for me. Like I was all good on page 1 and page 2. I was like, okay, wait a minute.
Uh-huh.
Well, what that just told me is don't ever accept any tickets because there's no way to like figure out.
Figure out
the
if it
value.
works. Anything. Just do your own way.
Right. Maybe that's what we're trying to get across. I'm not sure.
Exactly.
But
If there's consensus to strike that, I think we could strike that. Because this is really germane only to the example of tickets. Anything, that you pay market value, what's lobster or whatever the case that could, or coffee mugs, whatever that market value is. Just because we use a ticket example, it's like, well, we added that in there.
Makes it
We can either
confusing.
change the example or just strike from scalping is illegal all the way down, through the training or through discuss it with your ethics advisor.
Well, yeah, except in that first paragraph, you're talking about scalpers too. The face value of the privilege ticket for that performance is $30. If you illegally bought an equivalent ticket from a scalper, the only other way to get one would cost you twice that much. The prohibited source offers to sell your ticket for $30. It's okay to accept the offer. Because, I mean, that almost makes it seem like, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you could take this example and go, well, it's okay, because
Right.
so yeah, that's where I started to get really super confused at the whole thing. I mean, I would almost say the face value of the prohibited ticket source for that performance is $30. The prohibited source offers to sell you her ticket for $30. It's okay to accept that offer. And I would almost take the whole scalping thing out of it, because I think it makes the point the other way and would make them make the wrong decision on something like this.
Okay.
Well, I hearken again to my example of Bears tickets. Packer game at Soldier Field, tickets were going for $600 and $700 a couple of years ago when the Bears were good.
Right.
Somebody give you a ticket to a Bear Packer game, I would consider that to be a violation of the ordinance. Because they're worth a lot of money.
According to this
Actual-
paragraph, that's true, yeah.
This was an actual reality in Chicago within the last 5 years, where a bunch of very expensive tickets to, I think it was a concert, was given to politicians, and the whole group came under investigation because the value of the tickets turned out to be five figures,
Wow.
and they were given, you know. So these things become realities. Now, is it gonna happen in McHenry County? I don't think so, but, you
Good.
know. So it would be something that, in certain situations, you would have to look at that, because if you give me a market value, with, you know, face value of $150 ticket, but we all know that those tickets are $1,000, then that's influencing that person. You've just given them $850.
I completely agree. So maybe we just need to take the face value of the performance is $30. Maybe it just needs to say the fair value of the tickets, the fair market value of the tickets is $30. And obviously there's a lot of nuances to determine what the fair market value is. I don't know that we should get into that here. It's more just educating them, like, you better understand what the fair market value is of what you're receiving, and you better be asking questions before you take tickets like that.
Mhm.
Well, certainly when it comes to tickets, when you say fair market value, somebody's gonna recognize, at least, again, in my example.
That means,
That's not the face value. That's
Correct.
what it's going for on the market.
right.
Right.
So just to direct your attention to the ordinance, and this is how the ordinance is written. The ordinance clearly says fair market value.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons when we put this, I know it's a confusing example and I struggle with it too, but that shows you when I say squishy, because some things, face value and fair market value are just, you know, they can be distinguishable. Fair market value for this mug is, you know, probably easily determined, but the example really paints a picture of how, you know,
Or maybe, for the example, just to keep it simpler for somebody to understand, maybe you say the face value of the ticket performance is $30, the fair market value is $50.
Mm-hmm.
The prohibitive source offers to sell you his or her ticket for either 30 or 50, and you could say 30, it's not okay to accept, 50, it is okay to accept that offer.
Or you-
And you just kind of like show that, like, just the face value does not always determine the fair market
Well, I
value,
think
but
that's what you say. You say face
there-
value is not always a fair
fair
market
market
value.
value, yeah.
That actually wouldn't be a violation, because you would have a net gain of $20, which wouldn't go over the total amount that you could.
Right.
Oh, well, right.
Well, let's
It's
use-
not the prices.
yeah, well, let's use the Bears ticket, for example, when it was hundreds. You said $600
Right.
for the ticket, so
If
that
you use a
was,
bigger number, yeah.
yeah.
Right.
Right.
A bigger
That's
number
what
and
it's
like,
gonna come
and
at.
distill it down a little bit more so they understand there's a difference between face value and
Yeah,
fair market
use
value.
Bear Packers.
But without without all the nuances of what
Mhm.
comes into fair market value, I think
Right.
it's like,
Mhm.
it confuses the matter more than,
Mhm.
Although the face value of all
Educates.
Bear tickets are more than $100.
right.
Right.
But we have to remember also that this isn't just applying to tickets. Like you mentioned, it could be applying to coffee mugs.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So this gets into all the nuances possible, it seems like. So you have to be aware that there's a lot more nuances than just looking at the face value of something. You know, you can give somebody a diamond ring that you bought at the jeweler for $500. But maybe the jeweler was able to buy it at wholesale for a lot less and able to sell it to you at a discount. But the real value of it is something that you couldn't even find out unless you were a gemologist, you know. This really gets into the nuances that you really have to expect with this kind of a transaction.
Yeah. And I think part of the intent was just to say, think right before you accept it. You know, be careful and be mindful of it.
And maybe you just directly say somewhere in the answer to the example, if you simplify the example, maybe you just say very directly, like, you know, understand there's numerous ways to
Ascertain
a fair market value of a particular item.
You might take that ring and put it on eBay and triple your price.
Right. And you know, you need to be very cognizant of what that real fair market value might be before accepting a gift like that or something like that.
So,
you know, like really try to get your point across.
Yeah, so the last two sentences, and this is on the following page. Thus thus relying on this on the exception of the gift ban by paying market value is tricky. Determining the market value of a particular item is often difficult, and sometimes it is something you should discuss with the ethics advisor.
There you go.
Perfect. Yeah.
Really kind of hints that. Right, because you can see, you think if somebody wants to kind of sway you, and you know, they give you a rare coin, a rare quarter, let's say. Well, it's 25 cents. You know, but it may be worth $1,000 because of some I don't know, minting error or something. You know, I'm not a coin collector, but well, here, it's 25 cents. You're completely good, but in reality, they're giving me $1,000.
Right.
And they know it, I know it, but the face value is 25 cents. So that's what we have to be careful about, because if this would occur, there's people that could think of different ways to try to circumvent the letter of the ethics ordinance, and that's why it comes in. And so, any suggestions on changing this or adapting this to make it more clear or understandable? Open to, or we can always come back and revisit this one too if you want to give us some more thought. But it is a nuance.
What if we just, again, go back to the way it's written now and just say the face value of the performance, the ticket is, let's call it $80. And then say, but the fair market value based on the demand, because it's such a popular concert at this time, is actually $200. And just make it clear cut, because again, we're trying to teach. We're not trying to trick or trip up, right? So, if we make it just blatantly obvious that, you really shouldn't accept this because although the face value is $80, this is worth significantly more than that. And that way, and you could also, leave in, I would say, always feel free to discuss with your ethics advisor if you need to, but that would eliminate all the scalping discussion that maybe isn't necessary in this.
Well, again, that demonstrates the nuances that we would have to finally decide on. So it would actually have to be a case-by-case basis.
Right. That's true.
Are you talking about leaving the scalping piece in?
Yeah, because it adds to the entire span of nuances possible in determining the value of something.
Well, I think all you need to do, my suggestion would be, in the case of sporting events, tickets for sporting events, concerts, or something else that may be in high demand, fair market value is not necessarily the face value.
For tickets.
Yeah, and that's enough to get people to think.
Right.
So let me suggest this, and I like the idea. Maybe we just take out the whole scalping altogether. We take it out of the question, and we say if you illegally bought the equivalent from a scalper, we scratch that, and we just say the market demand is. We'll go with $80 fair market. Market demand is $120. And then the prohibited source offers to sell you her ticket for $80, which is the fair market value.
Which is the face value.
Or the face value, excuse me. Would that still then be okay if the fair market value is $120?
Yes, because that's less than 75, right?
No, the 75 is meals.
That's
Meals.
100.
Right.
It's less than 100, so it would not be okay because.
It's less than 100.
No, it's less than 100.
Oh.
It would be okay.
But the.
You're
oh,
selling it
yeah,
to you.
because
You're
you're-
giving it
Because you're
to
paying,
you.
so the
80,
40, right.
The gift is 40.
Oh, but that's not what we're trying to like get
Right.
to.
Right.
This example.
The
So we need to
point
make it
here
a-
is-
yeah,
Get the math right.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not trying to, yeah.
But that's where it gets tricky is, the point
It's
is really
80 and it's
fair
200.
market value
Fair
versus
market
face
value is
value, but now when you
200.
trip you up on the
So we need to
categories
get
with
that
the
right.
with the
Yeah, we're not
limits,
trying
so-
to.
Right.
You gotta get people
We're trying
to
to get
do the
concept
calculation
of
and
the
stuff, and
difference
I just think
between
it's
fair market
better,
and face value.
the concept is, it's not necessarily,
Right, that's what we're trying to get
I
at,
think
yeah.
that's all I need to say, it's not necessarily the face value of the
Right, and that,
ticket, period.
and I like the part, you know.
Some things don't
The last
go
two
with the
sentences, I like keeping those last two sentences.
If there ever were an actual hearing, I would be an observer, I would not be a participant.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Just, you know, this will be all on you
You can
guys.
sit back and enjoy the show.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
get the stuff.
All right, so let me rework this question, and I can always send it back to you. We're gonna take out the reference to scalping, we're gonna put, you know, the face value is $80, fair market value is $200. The prohibited source offers you to sell her ticket for $80, but then it would not be okay to
Not-
accept the offer.
Not okay to accept the offer.
Not
And then,
okay.
and then strike
And I'll say,
everything else except for the last two sentences.
I'll say be.
Well, but this is an exception, so it has
Right.
to be okay, right?
Right.
Aren't we supposed to show an exception?
Right, so how about I do, and maybe it's too convoluted. Offer to sell you the ticket for $80. It is not okay to accept the offer because it is over the $100 gift limit. Or I could say, but if the offer to sell the ticket for $120,
There you go.
It's okay
Then
to
it would be
accept
an
that offer.
it is under,
There you go.
assuming there were no other gifts, you know, because you have $100
You're
cumulative
going
total.
alone.
Okay, I will rework. Okay, and then we'll eliminate scalping. Then the next part of that says tickets to the most popular events, you know, such as ball games, music concerts, maybe legal.
Yep.
I think I could probably,
I think you can leave that in and just
Okay.
get rid of that scalping stuff.
yeah,
Gotcha.
but I'll rework that. I'll say keep in mind. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Yep, few
You're looking
pages
at how many
left.
pages
We-
are left?
Yeah, we might not get through this by 4:30, but.
Well, that's okay. When we meet in,
For next
in
time.
July in Hawaii, apparently.
Well, yeah, we'll have to schedule it. You all coming to Hawaii? That would be great.
Well, if you, that's, if the commission meeting is there, well, that's what we got to do, right?
Exactly.
Well, it depends, which island?
Maui.
There you go.
But watch out, the beach is eroding really bad, like kind
Is
of
it?
poly, yeah.
Okay.
Sidewalk collapse in front of the hotel.
Oh, no.
Oh, wow.
Really?
I'll still take my chances, you can take me with that.
I'm willing to risk it.
We can take one for the team.
Nice.
Okay.
So, exception 3 then?
Yes, exception 3 on the next page.
I found this very confusing. You are running for county board. I don't know who you are yet, though. Are you an employee? Are you just a person running for county board that doesn't
Right,
work?
this applies,
Mhm.
yeah.
So
No,
any,
wait, you have to be, you haven't been elected yet, so you must be.
You're running.
You must be,
Like
or
who-
you could be an incumbent, you know, incumbent running.
got it,
Or,
yeah.
Well, you're obviously, you're somebody covered under the ethics ordinance already, and now you're gonna run for this new position, right?
okay.
I would think.
Well, I
That's
don't-
why
I-
you're taking
I-
the
that was a
question.
That's clear. I'm
That
not
was a
sure that's
question
clear.
for me.
Yeah.
Actually, I was thinking of you, Terry.
I'm guessing.
When you were running for the county board, you have nothing to do, you're not employed at all
Right.
by anybody, you
Right.
don't work here, nothing.
And
And the only problem is that you're on county property when you accept something, so does that, would that have applied? Is that really what that means? That if somebody wanted to give you a campaign contribution,
no, I'd have to be under the, under this.
but before you were elected, she
That
just.
would be
the,
okay.
the ordinance didn't apply before
Right.
she went until she took her oath of office.
So as an incumbent, I can't come and
So that's why I thought this was like another
Okay.
trick question. Are you just a regular citizen? Are you employed here? Who are you?
You could just say, as an incumbent, you are running for county board.
Yeah.
Okay. Because it says you may not, however, accept the contribution on county property,
Right.
or at a time when it would be a prohibited political activity.
Now, if I were accepting a contribution on county property, it would depend on who I was accepting it from, and that person would, could possibly be
Mhm.
under issue. But if the two of us were not currently elected officials or employees, then, or appointees, then we wouldn't be under that, and we could, maybe swap a check or something.
Right.
Because we were there to make public comment or whatever. So, but I think if he puts, as an incumbent, you are running.
Mhm.
So-
Or to simplify.
Or as an employee.
Or as
Yeah.
someone.
How about if you were
Incumbent
running
is
for
running again.
re-election
Yeah.
to the
There you
county
go.
board?
Then
it just
that would be
simplifies.
clear, because then I was wondering, is this really about county property? What is this?
Yes.
What is this about?
No, it really is about county property.
But only if you meet the conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you can accept donations, and that's really what it's saying. The election code does provide the ability to accept donations. County property is different because now it's on a county resource. Now you're conducting prohibited political activity in a county building on a county property, and that's really where we want to distinguish. If it's out on the street and somebody hands you a campaign contribution, that's fine. That's not county property. But if they're here and they said, "Oh, here's my campaign contribution to you," while you're in the building, that's a no-no.
I like using that word county resource, because the property is one resource.
Mhm.
That is a whole different flavor
Right.
of things for me.
Okay.
I thought the next example was okay. Still on exception 3, the second example. We okay with that one? The golf.
And, I'm down on 5, because I thought 5 was great.
We still have 4.
Okay. 4 was pretty simple.
4. Yeah, 4 is just
Boring. If
Four
you
is
get
just-
brought up on that, you deserve to be convicted.
Someone gave me some educational materials. I mean, like,
Right.
I hope that's not our only case.
Right.
That one was hard to give an example for. I mean, it's because that was pretty straightforward.
Right.
But I thought you did a really good job on the travel.
Thank you.
Because I was thinking of all those Illinois elected officials that go to China.
We can, if we're on example 5, in the first one, we can scratch, pay for your travel to a kite flying competition in Hawaii. We could say maybe a wedding in Hawaii.
Nice.
No, we'll leave kite flying. Okay. Great. Any issues with 5, exception number 5? There's, you see, it's really developed because there's a lot of criteria that goes into it. I mean, it's really fact-based.
Oh,
It's
there's
based on the
some there.
circumstances.
There's some.
I just have a question. Are we on the next page yet?
Yes.
Mhm.
Roman 4, Little Roman 4.
Mhm.
As an attorney, I always have problems with reasonably. And reasonable,
Mhm.
it says length of time that the destination is paid for, but must reasonably relate to the purpose of the education. What the heck does that mean?
Oh, see, I got that right away. So that means that if I extend my trip by 2 days, I can't accept the benefactor paying for my extra 2 days because it's not reasonably, attributed to what I was going with the purpose of my trip. So,
That's what I thought as well, because that was another example.
yeah.
But what I thought this would be addressed to, let's say, there's a function down in the city. Can somebody here from Woodstock spend overnight in the city at the expense of somebody else. When it's easy to commute back and forth.
Because
There's a
it's
lot of-
getting over at 11 o'clock and.
And let's say the Kennedy's not screwed up like it's screwed up now.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get back and forth. I mean, I know a lot of municipal employees would attend the Illinois Municipal League functions on somebody else's dime, and it was just as easy for them to travel back and forth.
See, I mean, that example in the city and having a hotel paid for that night, that would be reasonable to me. You know, because you're driving late at night after you've been eating and drinking, and you know what I'm saying?
See, now you're adding things.
Well,
You're saying it's for
reasonable.
safety reasons.
Uh-huh.
If I'm boozed up, then I can take the,
Well, if
I
it
can
comes
take the
before
money.
us, then we decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, so and this is just the example. The ordinance is pretty basic. Travel expenses for a meeting to discuss business.
Right.
I mean, that's it. So trying to develop those different examples of what would come into it. So reasonably, but it's in the training and if somebody's reading that, they're going to interpret reasonable. I mean, my interpretation of reasonably may be different from everybody else's in this room, and it's really where you may have those questions. You may have to address that question at some point in time. We do have some governance in our travel business policy on when you can stay and how you can stay. So, and our auditors are pretty diligent about policing that. So there has to be some good reasons.
That's because the county pays for it.
That's right.
That's why.
She
Oh,
is.
there you go.
But but really it comes down to, you know, if I were to go to a conference, sometimes based on just the travel, you know, I may not be able to get, you know, a flight until the next day. You know, is that a reasonable, you know, because I couldn't get out that night before, if I'm staying a little bit longer, is that reasonable based on whatever the circumstances were? Not because I chose to stay the next day and attend, you know, or see the sites. If I'm just held back because of travel logistics, you know, that could be considered reasonable.
Reasonableness is a range, just keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Subject to interpretation.
Yes.
A lot of trust involved.
Yeah, but ultimately, that's why we have you here.
Mhm.
Sometimes that may have to be interpreted.
Mhm.
You may have to
Exactly.
determine, is that reasonable or is that not?
Right.
So the question was brought up, should we leave it as reasonably or do we?
Sure.
Okay.
Exception 6, a gift from a relative, that seemed pretty straightforward to me.
Yep.
Um, 7. I liked those examples, I thought those were okay.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Exception 8.
Seems to rule out takeouts or doggy bags, doesn't it?
The PowerPoint I have, a doggy bag with a big X through it. An old PowerPoint. Yeah.
Well, the example brings home that it's per person, because I skipped over per person when I saw $100 for pizza. And I says no.
Well, I will tell you, we had a whole debate
Huh?
over the $75 per person in a mock case, this is like last year, recently.
Yeah.
And because there was, in the example, there was a county employee and his wife that got taken to dinner. And so the question became, I mean, the ordinance says $75 per person. So some of us assumed that meant $75 for him, $75 for her. And others assumed, well, he's the only employee of the county and it's $75 then for him and his wife together as one. But that's not real clear.
Well, that's one of the examples here. They use an example, they say it would be different if the spouse was an employee.
No, that was in the gifts.
Oh,
That's
okay.
different. So in the gift one, it actually specifies that it applies to your spouse.
Mhm.
In the meals one for the $75, it does not specify. So it's like, well, okay, well, it specified it in the gift, but it didn't specify it in the meals, which means that could be interpreted as it was intentional because it wasn't supposed to apply to the spouse on the meals section. It was only supposed to apply to the spouse in the gift section. So it's very unclear. That one, it actually gets super sticky. And we never really, because we actually made a suggestion at that point that if they revise the ethics ordinance to make it more clear
Mhm.
whether,
Right? Right.
which that would really apply
Did they
to.
do that then, or what?
Not
And,
yet.
and that's,
Not yet,
and
but-
that's really common to have a employee and a spouse
Right.
get dinner for free.
But
Go
I
to a
think-
dinner together, right?
I think we agreed that the spirit of it was like you wouldn't want to be in a situation where the spouse is getting all this extra just because they're not covered under the ethics ordinance, right? So you have to kind of follow what the spirit of it was, which is, you know, this allocation for the entity. So like the person and their spouse is kind of the entity. Because otherwise, right, so he would say, you know, order her 2 lobsters and I'll have the chicken.
But they each get $75.
Well, 4 lobsters. I don't know. I'm trying.
But I'm saying like the spouse wouldn't get any more. They each got $75, like if it's a per person. But then it's like, is that really the spirit? Because it's like when they wrote the gift ban. I mean, the ethics ordinance, I assume, you know, it's one document that has all these things in there, and if they specify it on gift ban and don't specify that on the meal piece, then
It's a good
did they
point.
really
I
intend
think-
for that?
yeah,
What
it
was the
just
spirit
missed.
of that?
I think it was just missed.
I don't know,
Yeah.
right? And none of us were there
Makes
when they
sense.
were like, you know, debating that, so we have no idea what the actual intent was.
So there
It's
is,
confusing.
and so we have in the definition relative,
Mhm.
and I think I'll find that relatives are covered under the ethics ordinance. So in that example, it would be $75 per person for the employee and their spouse, because the spouse, by virtue of that employee, would be covered under this.
So it's 150 for the two
So
of
it's
them.
150,
Right.
and that's where that case fell apart because, well, the combination of that was still $150. It was not $75
Mhm.
because the kicker in there was a bottle of wine. It was $100 bottle of wine. Did I put it over? But technically, it was $75 per person per day. So the food value could be 75 plus 75, 150. So we're going to revise that case and put another little twist in it. But I think that was astute when you sorted through it. But relatives are included in here.
Right, but it doesn't, like I said, the way they
Yeah. So it's right here. So it's, except as permitted, you know, officer, his or her spouse.
right, but so if you go to the gift ban, go where it says $100, because it specifically says,
Let's see, is it up here? What's that?
oh, that's the $75 per person in a single calendar day. I saw that.
Where is $100? Oh, is it in the definitions? Or is it further down?
You must have been further down or something. There, $100.
Okay, any item, cumulative value less than $100.
Oh, but I thought there was something somewhere where it specifically also talked about the spouse. I'd have to look it up, but it was.
So right in the very beginning, when it talks about gifts, it does specifically mention, except as permitted by this section, which are all the exceptions, no employee or his or her spouse. So it does extend that prohibition of accepting those, you know, within the ordinance.
Kind of.
But what's interesting to note, and this is one of the questions we can go through, and this was kind of like a little trick question, is it talks about $75 for food, and that's per day. So technically, if somebody can get a steak dinner every single day, assuming that doesn't exceed $75. But then the gift is a cumulative total of $100, so $100 worth of value. But then each of these exceptions are mutually exclusive and independent of every other. And so when we look at the quiz questions, we'll talk about that. Because that's an important factor. And that came out in that case, that mock case, because if you get a, in fact, even looking at this exception, it may be a little bit misleading because it talks about the pizza, $100 divided by 20 people, that's $5 each.
I like your best.
Nice.
If
pick up my daughter,
and it
it's my
says
alarm.
so long as prohibited to source it and buy you food or refreshments on the same day exceeding $75. Technically, that $5 in pizza could be considered a gift under, under 12. As long as they didn't buy you something of $100 in value. So if you didn't get anything else except for that meal that day and that piece of pizza for $5, that would be $75 in food plus $5 against this $100.
Yeah, but see, in here, under your, under exception 5 on here, so right before it says exception 6, it says, these exemptions apply to the officer or employee only. An officer or employee is responsible for any expenses attributable to persons traveling with them.
I'm sorry, where was this again?
So go to exception 6,
Okay.
the paragraph right before, where it says exception 6.
Mhm.
So the paragraph right before that, the end of 5.
Right, that's where I thought we left that case. Did you
'Cause-
think
'cause-
it was because?
Because I thought that when we looked at the $100, we determined that applied jointly to the person and their spouse.
It was
So
the
it wasn't
75
per
'cause it was
person.
food, remember?
Right, but then the
And mine.
75 said that there was something in there, so I'd have to go back and read it, that made it seem like that applied possibly per person per day. There was some nuance. I'd have to really go back and dig into the ordinance again, but believe me, there was a very long debate about this.
Seems like we need a CPA to figure that out.
Maybe. It's more of an attorney thing. It was like,
No.
it was like missing a word. But, yeah.
Yeah, so, and I see the point about these exemptions apply to the officer and employee only. Then it does say the officer or employee is responsible for any expenses attributable to the additional person traveling with them. So that wouldn't be an exception. Like if a prohibited source, wants to fly me to see some ethics seminar, in San Diego, well, because it's attributed to my job and, they can actually cover that, I would be exempted from that travel. But if I say I'm going to bring my wife along, she doesn't get the benefit of that exemption either. If I say I want her to come along, she's not accepted out of that. You can make an argument up to $100 for her, and then the food $75 per person per day. There may be some nuance there, but the airfare, if it's, let's say it's $200, at the minimum I'll have to spend $100 to cover that. I mean, the risk of violation, because somebody could say that's not how it applies and it would come to you, but at the end of the day, this exemption only applies to me specifically, to fly me to San Diego for some ethics conference or ethics training. And that's why that's worded in there. This is, you could see how this gets convoluted.
Oh, it does.
And
That's why we're here.
that's why you're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's past 4:30, which is our ending time. Are we okay to
We can pick this up.
adjourn and pick it up at the next meeting? Be respectful of everyone's time, plus I have to pick up my daughter.
Yep. We will.
What's that?
Teach me.
Okay, there you go.
We're going to start. So we left off then at. What did we leave off?
We left
Off at 7.
At the end of
Oh.
7, 8. We were on 8, which is because we started talking about the $75, which is
Yep.
how we
We'll pick
got
it up.
waylaid.
We'll pick it up here.
Okay, unless there's anything else, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Never mind.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Aye. All right, thank you all.